Hey team, good to see everybody in the room today. We're going to have a great conversation and great interaction today in this collaborative brainstorming session that we do every single Tuesday. Today we have the opportunity of hearing from our very own Dr. Professor Jeremy Rands. Well, I'm not sure if he's a doctor or professor at this point, but we could give him one. The Idea Network will officially bestow this upon our dear friend, perhaps at some point. But today we're going to get kicked off with a word of prayer. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully things are going extremely good for each and every one of you. We're going to ask Andrew Peters, our resident man with two first names, if he'll open us up in a word of prayer and ask God to bless our conversation and community. Community roundtable at this point. Andrew, would you open up in a word of prayer?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we love you. Thank you for the love that you have for us. Thank you for the honor that it is to serve you in the ministry. Lord, we thank each and every person that takes their time each week to speak to us. I pray that you give them wisdom. Lord, thank you for Brother Jeremy Rands and his willingness to speak to us today. I pray that we take it in and use it in our own personal ministries. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right, I'm going to throw it over to our lady.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Another Tuesday in the books. I looked it up today and we are 76 days away from the Idea Summit, if you can believe that. The entire staff is so stoked to see all of you guys at the summit. As you probably know by now, I think Jason's mentioned it multiple times, we have an Idea Network members meetup at the summit specifically for you guys. We have a few things up our sleeves that we're not quite ready to announce, but we're getting them ready for you guys, and very excited to just have a place where, kind of like we did at San Antonio, have a couple hours that are just dedicated to members meeting each other, as well as potentially new members. So we're really looking forward to that. As you guys are considering the summit and coming, whether it is going to work for your schedule, specifically start praying about the Kingdom Advancement Luncheon. This is where we raise funds for church planters and church revitalizers across the country. And we have 10 amazing church planners. I think we have 7 church planners and 3 church revitalizers. But even if you're not able to make it to the event, you can still contribute to those church planners and revitalizers online if you prefer that way. But we have a huge goal to raise those funds and kind of kick those off. And of course, even here in our membership, we have plenty of sponsored members who actually were a part of the past year's Kingdom Advancement Luncheons, which we previously called the Church Planters Luncheon. We expanded the name because we wanted to include church revitalizers as well. Because of course there are so many churches that need revitalization, and we want to be able to contribute to that as well. So check that out online. We actually just did a big email about it, but if you didn't see that email, you can just go online to the Idea Summit webpage and see under one of the experiences is the Kingdom Advancement Luncheon, and you can see all the details there. So have fun with that. Back to you, Pastor Josh.
Thanks, Kylie. Looking forward to the summit. I just spoke with a pastor this morning who said he's going to book his tickets today. In fact, just yesterday, I booked my flight out to Dallas and booked our room and booked our rental car and everything. Very excited about getting out there and seeing a lot of you. And again, we actually have more people registered at this point for this event than any event we've ever had. So the momentum is on our side. We're very excited about it. Now, today we are going to have a great conversation with one of our very own leaders, Jeremy Rands, who serves as the Vice President of Initiatives for the Idea Network. And he is going to be speaking about managing a staff that is very different from you. Now, you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, I mean, come on, a staff. I mean, maybe right now I'm in a position where I am the staff. And what does that mean for me? And one of the big mistakes that we often make is not realizing that the deacons that God has given us, even if they don't have the deacon title, the servants of the church that God has given us, the men and women that you think of that rise to the top of your mind as the most gifted and spiritually mature in your congregation, can be utilized in this way. Or if you're pastoring a congregation that does have a few staff members, these individuals think differently than you. They are different than you. They have different skill sets. So I'm excited about taking notes, learning myself from my dear friend, and for each and every one of us learning as well. We're going to all stay in the same round table. And so prepare your questions, your cues for some A's at the end. We want to make sure this is as practical and helpful for you as possible. At this point, take it over, Jeremy Rands.
All right. Hey, guys. It's good to see you. I actually asked a couple of our team to be in here today. In that way, I stay honest and they can hold me accountable to what I say as well. And I asked them to give us some input as well as we talk about some things. So as I was preparing for this, I thought about a couple staffs in the Bible. I thought about Moses and the 12 spies, and remember 10 were bad and 2 were good. How many of you remember that song you learned in Bible school? So Moses had a staff of 12 that were supposed to lead the people of Israel into the promised land, and 10 came back and said, this is impossible. Then I thought of David and his mighty men. And there was a time in David's life where he said this, these men are too hard for me. And what David was saying is, I can't work with these guys. Like, they think different, they act different. They were even killing each other. And he's got to try to manage this. He is meeting and thinking that someone is good for the team, somebody else, because if it's a position that they're going to have or think they're going to lose, they fight and end up death. And David comes to a place where he's like, how can I deal with these men? But I want to remind you that David was by himself. Then he went to 400 mighty men, 600. And then when David was done his kingdom, I read it was like 27,000 positions that David had in his kingdom. And this is from a little shepherd boy that wasn't even invited to the party when they were anointing a king. He was so overlooked. But 27,000 men were needed to help him with this kingdom. The most in Saul's kingdom I could ever find that Saul was ever with was 3,000 men. And when King Saul was with those 3,000 men, all he was doing was whining that they loved David and they want to go serve David, and they don't love him and they don't honor him. Then I thought of Jesus and his disciples. And boy, what a team that was, right? One betrayed him. Peter says, you're not going to wash my feet. And then he turns around, well, wash all of me then. Peter says, there's no way we're going to let you go to the cross. Like, you're going to stop the Son of God from doing what he was sent here to do. And then in the next moment, he curses and denies Jesus. So all through the Bible, we can find teams of people. We can find dysfunctioning teams. We can find teams that worked well together. We find teams like Paul and Barnabas because of someone like a John Mark, where Paul and Barnabas, they worked well together. But there was another man that Barnabas saw as important to the work of the ministry that Paul didn't at the time. And that third person caused division within a team that was really working well and starting churches and ministering in that first century church. So we see all through the Bible this thought of teams, and we see the dysfunction of teams. We see the consequences, right? Because 10 of the spies could not come back and give the report that was needed to be given, an entire generation of Israelites died in the wilderness. Because David had a man on his team that was jealous and afraid that somebody else was going to take his position, death came and hurt came. I think of just what Jesus went through when he was all by himself. and he looks over. Imagine that look. And I love the film Chosen, because you get a different glimpse, whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but it's really good, of what each of these individual disciples were like. And how about Matthew? Like, have you ever seen Matthew in that light that they haven't chosen? Like, here's this group of people trying to function, and they always didn't get along together. They fought. So what do we do? Because the thought would be this: well, if I could just get everybody on my team to think like me and act like me and be like me, we would have a really, really strong team. And I want to push back on that today. You would have a very boring team.
Yeah.
And you then become the lid of your ministry, and your team becomes the lid of the ministry that limits what God really wants to do within your ministry. God does not make everyone to be like you in order for him to get glory. He made everyone uniquely different, that when they come together, there's different pieces of their character, different pieces of their talents that then God uses for him to receive glory.
Yeah.
If everyone thought like you and acted like you, when there was success, then you would be the one that everyone would look to as the great. And that goes totally against spiritual leadership.
Yeah.
We're not to lead where we get glory. We're to lead where only God gets the glory. So first in understanding how to lead a team that's very different is I want to talk to you first about just realizing some things. And I'll also say this: I wish that I was always good at this, and I didn't have to learn these things the hard way. Everything we talk about today, I'll be totally honest with you, I've had to learn through trials. I've had to learn through defeats. I've had to learn through hurts. But these are just personal experiences that I've heard. The first thing I want you to write down is this: in order for you to manage a team that is very different from you, you've got to understand that team member's personality and their upbringing. Now, this is vitally, vitally important. Don't overlook this, or you're going to overlook, and really it's going to cause you problems. This is going to help you understand where your teammate is coming from, and it's going to give you a frame of reference. Culturally, people are different. Their upbringings are different. Somebody on your team that grew up in a home that maybe did not have a dad is going to respond to authority and respond to people very differently than maybe somebody else that had a very strong father in their home. Somebody that grew up in a single parent home, where maybe a mom raised them, is going to be very, very different than in a home where there's a mom and dad, that is a healthy home, a home that they're getting from both parents what is needed. Somebody that's raised in a ministry family is going to be very, very different in ministry and on a team than somebody that's raised outside of a ministry family that grew up in a secular home, that thinks differently, their church background, where they come from, their frame of reference on things. Now, I'm going to just right here, just kind of dive into this a little bit, because I think this is the start of trying to understand how to work with a team different than you, because you have to respect where somebody's outlook is coming from. So often, if we don't understand this, we think that it's rebellion, or we think that it's we can misunderstand the way they think and think that it's insubordination. We can think that they're trying to be resistant to us, but they truly don't understand, because your upbringings are different. So I grew up in a ministry home, but my dad, two things about my dad. My dad was married to the ministry, and we moved around a lot when we were young, starting churches. So because we moved around a lot, I learned at a very young age, don't get close to people, because goodbyes are very, very difficult. So I conditioned myself not to have to say goodbye and make it hurt, knowing that goodbyes were coming. I just don't get close enough to, and so I avoid the hurt. I've got other guys on our team that relationships are so important to them that boy, they got a friendship and they hold on to that friendship, and they are just tremendous with that. And they're paying attention to things that I don't feel are important, and I'm paying attention to things that they don't feel that are important. And the reason why is because our upbringings were so vitally different. And your upbringing does cause you to think a certain way. Your parents, the home you grew up in, does cause you to think a certain way. And by accepting these things and realizing these things and learning these things about people, you'll understand, if you'll take the time to learn where they're coming from. So now you're not questioning their motive behind everything that they're doing. You're understanding their heart. And by understanding a person's personality, their upbringing, it's going to get you to their heart. And you can be different as long as you share the same heart. But differences can keep you from sharing the same heart as well if you're not careful. I had a guy on our team. He grew up in a very, very, very ultra conservative background. So I didn't grow up in necessarily an ultra conservative background, although we were very conservative. He grew up in kind of the extreme. And I had to learn that about him. That's always in the back of his mind as we're making decisions, as we're moving forward. He's always wanting to make sure that we're not going anywhere near that because of all the hurt and the frustration it caused in his life. And before I recognized that and really understood that about him, I thought everything we do, he tries to resist it. Everything he's doing, we do. He's trying to throw up reasons why we can't move forward, when all he was doing is trying to protect his feelings and trying to make sure he wasn't going to experience or put somebody else in that same hurt. My dad was great. He was great for the ministry, but he was a horrible dad. And what I mean by that is I knew this growing up. If anybody in the church needed him, he was always going to be there. If I needed him, he was never going to be there. And the reason why? Because he was always going to be at the church. And I've got guys on our team that have a great relationship with their dad, a wonderful relationship with their dad. And because of that, it causes us to think differently. And so I just want to throw that out, and we can talk through that in some question and answer time, but understand the personality and understand the upbringing of the people on your team. And if you'll take the time to learn that, it will make managing the differences much easier. Secondly, do this. Realize that different is not rebellion, and different is not insubordination. I touched on that in the first point, but I really want to dig into that on this one. It's just different. Just because someone thinks different than you, they're not challenging your leadership. They're actually adding to your leadership. And so oftentimes, if we're not careful, we can watch someone that's different and we internalize it, and we try to put our own thinking and questions on what they're saying and doing. And many times we come to the wrong conclusion. And then as we approach that situation, we approach it with the wrong understanding, and it only leads to turmoil and frustration. So we've got to understand people are going to be very different, and different is not a bad thing. Different will add to your leadership if you'll allow it and then you'll embrace it. Look for ways that people can challenge your thinking. I want to repeat that. Look for ways for people to challenge your thinking. Invite people to challenge your thinking. If you're working on a team, and again, like Josh said, whether these are volunteers, this is not just a paid team. This is just whoever God gives you in leadership within your church. Invite a different way of thinking. And if you're there and people are not challenging you on your thinking, I would challenge them on that. How come nobody is thinking anything different? Why is nobody pushing back on anything that I'm saying? it's very important for a leader to surround himself with someone that will challenge his thinking, will develop his thinking, and will make him think better before he presents his vision and leadership before a bigger audience. Then I want to talk about this. So realizing some things first. Realize people are different. It's not rebellion or insubordination. Realize that their personality, their upbringing is going to bring a different way of looking at things, and accept that. Now, what do we do with that? Because we have to have a functioning team, right? So I would say this to you. Number one, spend time talking. You must spend time talking. Sharing. There are staff meetings that I'll have where I will do the majority of the talking. And I'll do that on purpose because I want them to hear my heart. I want them to see me struggle through something. I want them to hear why I'm doing something and why I think this is the way we ought to go, because I want them to understand what I'm thinking. In order for them to give back good feedback and to listen to somebody else's perspective that may be different than mine, it's good for them to understand my heart and where I'm coming from. So spend time talking, spend a lot of time talking. And then number two, you probably know where I'm going with this, spend time listening to what they heard you say. If you want to manage a staff that's very different than you have to spend time listening to them repeat back to you what you said. Have you ever done this with someone? You said something and they thought you said something totally different. And when they came back with that, you're like, that's not at all what I said. And they're like, no, you said this. Yeah, I said that, but that's not what I really meant. I meant this. And then you get frustrated. Well, how could you think that? That's not me. It goes back to what we were first talking about, is understanding personalities, understanding upbringings, understanding a person's heart. And the best way that you can do that is by talking and then by listening to what they heard you say. I'll spend a lot of time in meetings with people saying this. Tell me what you just heard. Tell me what I just said. And oftentimes they'll repeat it and totally miss what I was trying to say. And so spend time talking, spend time listening to what they heard you say. And then number three, write this down under training, spending time training. Let them go do it and let them make mistakes in your eyes. I had a staff member one time, I said to him this, why are you doing everything? And he said, well, because they're not doing it the way I want it done. And I said this to him, well, really, you haven't even let them do it. Well, I just know they're not going to do it the way I want it done. And this is what I would encourage you to do. If you want to manage a group of people that think different than you, understanding that's powerful, understanding that's the only way you're really going to grow a ministry, that's understanding you're not the only one that thinks right, by bringing people in, empowering them to work with you, even though they're different, you've got to let them make mistakes, because the mistake is in your eyes, not necessarily theirs. And give them time, give it time to unfold. The first time someone on your team that thinks differently than you does something different, don't come to them always and address it, unless it's biblically wrong. But just because it's maybe not what you would do, let that thing play out, let it unfold. Because you might learn something that you never would have learned in leadership if you wouldn't have let that person, given that person the time to show you why doing it different was valuable. I've done that. We've got Richard Moses in the room. He just started not long ago doing our music. And I'll be honest with you, there's a few weeks ago, I was like, oh no, it's not clicking. It's not clicking at all. And it was one service. And I went home to my wife and I'm like, this guy is going to ruin our church. This isn't it. Like, it's totally different. And my son was leading worship and he led with a guitar and we were making some moves and I felt like he was pulling us back. Like we were singing hymns again. And I'm like, oh no. But I never approached him. Matter of fact, this is the first time he's even hearing this. I never approached him. I let it just play out. And I watched it for a couple of weeks begin to unfold. Yesterday or Sunday, we had a wonderful worship service. It fit right into where it needed to get to. And the reason why I truly believe is him and I are as different as oil and water. We are different in every area. But I allowed him the opportunity, even though it wouldn't have been my pick. It wouldn't have been the way I would have wanted it done. I also learned this. A good majority in our church said, that was wonderful. Wasn't that awesome? And truthfully, I would have said to those people, what were you listening to? Like, no. But it reminded me of this. Not everyone thinks like me. There was a great majority of people in our church that loved it and saw great value in it. And we let that play out. And over the last then several weeks, it's just gotten to where it needed to get to. And if I would have jumped in there the very first time, I would have ruined it. I would have messed it up. Because the last thing that you want people doing is walking on eggshells, worried that you're going to come in and scold them, change it, or their opinion really doesn't matter. You'll never grow great leaders within your ministry if they have to learn to only think like you. And I'll get to that in just a moment. Next, if you'll write this down, my time is done. Ask questions before you make accusations. Ask questions. People that think that are different than you, ask questions before you make an accusation. You're just wanting to do this the way you want it done. That might not be true. That's an accusation. Hey, tell me your thoughts. What behind you? I saw that you made these changes. Tell me about that. Let me hear what your reasoning behind that was. And you'll come to a very healthy conclusion that then you can have a conversation and you can learn as much as you're going to be able to teach. And then reach the heart with your vision. Recognize this, guys. Your vision can be accomplished when it's not just your way. The vision can be accomplished when two different people think the path there may be different, but the goal is accomplishing the vision, right? This takes time together. This takes effort. This takes relationship, and it takes reaching the heart. Reach the heart with your vision. And then I'll end with this and we can go into some questions. Accept biblical over preferences. And this is what I mean by that. In Exodus chapter 18, verse 21 and 22, Jethro says to Moses, moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and let them judge the people. There is a leadership model in Exodus 18 for leadership in ministry. And that model is this: teach them truth, teach them to love God and fear God, teach them biblical principles. And if you have a team of people that think differently from each other, but think the same biblically, you've got a valuable team. You'll reach more people than you've ever reached before. Because the goal is biblical, not preference. Now, if there's a team that is divided over biblical issues, you'll never move forward. It'll cause division within your church, and you guys know that. But if it's preferences or the way to do something, teach them biblical, and then let them, being yielded to the Spirit of God, make decisions that might not be the same personality or way you would do it, but you can always point back to the Bible and the church will grow. So clear vision, clear goals, clear expectation, clear boundaries. but not conforming, so they have to be you. Because to be you is to be impossible. And let me say this, it's unfair because you can change and you always give yourself the liberty to change, but they don't know when to change. So if the goal is to be you and to think like you, and you're allowed to change, then there's a target that they'll never be able to hit. There's a target they'll never be able to feel like they're contributing. And they've got to try to keep up with the changes that you're going to make. And all of us make changes within our leadership, right? Maturity, time, family makeup, burdens that we carry. I know a lot of the guys in this room, and all of you guys that I know, you've made changes within your ministry. I was told one time that Josh Tice got up in front of his church and said, "We will never have drums in this church." Is that true, Josh?
That is
And he
accurate.
did. And
I
he
said,
did, right?
The moment the drums come in, the Bible goes out.
Is that what you said? And
Many times.
And if everyone has to agree with that, then he changes. So what happens? I mean, that isn't that confusing then to people, then that I have to conform to him and he's allowed to change? No, it creates a lot of division within a team. And so expect biblical over preferences on your team. Bring unity around the biblical and allow for the differences in perspectives. Over the last several months here, we've talked about like love languages. We've talked about a lot of different wonderful attributes in leadership, and that has helped us. And you're going to have all of that on your team. People that have a different love language, people that see people differently, people that need different things. And I want to encourage you guys, see the value of that, embrace that, and let those people lead within your ministry, and you will see your ministry begin to explode instead of everyone being like you and watching your ministry implode. All right, Josh.
I love it. There's so much good here, so many great questions that we can get to. And first and foremost, I want to begin by throwing it to the entire team and say, what questions immediately arise? I wrote down my own, which I can kickstart the Q&A portion, but I want to go to you. I don't want to dominate this part of the conversation. What questions come up from this presentation in your mind that you might be able to bring to Jeremy at this point? Who'd like to begin? So everybody says, you know what, there's a question that really sparked in my mind that I really want to bring to the table and get the wisdom of Jeremy on. Who wants to begin? You raise your hand and we'll jump in. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I have no clue quite how to phrase it, so maybe you can just opine on it for me, Jeremy. But I work with Dale Curdy, one of the easiest guys in the world to work with. And yet we're so opposite, and there's always moments where my own insecurities will rise in my mind, and there's times of stifling them, swallowing them, constant battles with pride. Does that ever get any easier? Is that just an ongoing journey to do? And are there some ways to I trust Dale very implicitly. He has the green light to let me know if I'm doing something dumb or stupid or whatever. And but is that just a constant battle?
Yeah, I would say that it's always going to be a battle. Maybe over time it might get easier, especially the longer you work with someone. But that's part of relationships, and that's part of a team. But you're always going to be human. And I think as long as you're human, you're always going to struggle with that side of things. The longer you work with someone, the more you trust them, the more you allow it. So what I would say, though, is this: when those things come up, those are a great time to allow what doesn't feel right to happen because of trust. Now again, we're not talking about biblical issues. We're not talking about sinful things. We're talking about just your common, I think we ought to do this differently. I think it's a very humbling and a very good thing for leaders every so often to submit and say, that's not any way that I would have done it. I don't even know if I agree with doing it that way. I don't even know if I understand that, but I'm going to yield to you and I'm going to let you lead in this area. And by doing that is you're creating that habit in your life of letting someone else do it differently. And I think the only way that you're going to overcome that is by submitting to that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's definitely something we co-pastor, so I consider him my pastor. I submit to his authority. I listen on Sundays when he preaches. When it's his turn to preach, I listen and try to learn from my pastor. And but he definitely does things the way I would not do it sometimes, and I'm sure I do things the way he doesn't do them, and it works really well. It just takes a lot of pride swallowing, and it just shows how prideful of a person maybe I am. But yeah, thanks.
That's awesome. Anyone else that would like to jump in and follow up with a question? Mutual submission is something that we attempt to practice within our executive team at Southern Hills with the pastors there. Mutual submission, meaning that at times we come to each other and we discuss how different we would do something. One of the practical ways in which we've been able to do it is by a number system, meaning if there's a disagreement and we're not headed forward fully on the same page, we like to give a number to it. So if I were to say, okay, we've got this event coming up and we disagree on how this part should go, for me, this is like a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they say, oh, for me, this is like a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. And oftentimes when we're able to say, because I have a personal opinion about everything, Fred might say, what's your opinion on this? I give my opinion. Jason gives his opinion. And then Jason says, for me, this is like a 9 out of 10 for me. And I'm like, oh, I'm a really strong opinion at a 3 out of 10. Fred's a 7 out of 10, but Jason's a 9 out of 10. Then we're going to say, hey, let's do it your way. The problem with different personalities is I could be a 3 out of 10, but because I'm very expressive, I could express my 3 out of 10 bigger than he expresses his 9 out of 10. And it feels like I'm getting my way each time. That's a problem. And so for us, that numeric value system allows us to modulate our own personalities and genuinely give in and submit when something is that valuable of importance to somebody else. We do that in my marriage, and I do that within my partnerships. Another question, follow-up for Jeremy as it relates to this concept of...
I got a question.
Yeah, who is there?
I got a question.
Oh, James.
That's
yeah,
James. Yeah, I haven't been able to be here in a while because I got psychology class during our meeting time this semester. It's horrible. But so Josh, you kind of really answered half the question, but what do? You talked about when people make mistakes. What do you do when it gets too many mistakes? Like, how do you graciously deal with that? If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. And I think that you use the right word, graciously. I think whenever you're dealing with people that make mistakes, just telling someone they made a mistake isn't sufficient. I think you've got to, before you even say, hey, you made a mistake here. I think Stephen Covey said it, seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. Ask them why they did it. These are some issues, or these are some things that I'm seeing. I would be careful with using accusatory words. These are my issues. This is a mistake. Hey, I want to talk to you about these 3, 4, 5, 6 events. Tell me your perspective. Much of the time with some people, what I found is this: they know they're making mistakes. They just don't know what to do differently. And by you coming in and coaching them and helping them, they've recognized it. And now you can come in and help them. Other times they don't know it. And it's a great opportunity for you to say, would you consider this? And then sometimes the third thing I would say with that is sometimes what other people I view as mistakes with other people, when I really truly find out from them what happened and what they did, I realized it wasn't a mistake on their part. It was a mistake on my thinking. And I was able to learn something from them. And so I think you've got to figure out what of those three it is, because just because someone does it differently doesn't mean it's a mistake. But just because they do it differently doesn't mean it's not a mistake either. And I think you've got to get to the heart of it and figure that out. So when you say it's a mistake, what were the consequences to that? Were the consequences it hurt the church, it hurt families in the church, or were the consequences really just I didn't like it? And I think you've got to with the right questions answer that honestly, and then by determining that you can lead your team to either number one, not make the mistake again, or learn so you realize that really wasn't a mistake, that was good, and I'm going to change my thinking. Again, I would caution everyone
That
in
was
this
good.
room, conformity is not always healthy. It's not always healthy in a team, because then they're just doing it to please you and their heart isn't in it any longer. Or they're doing it so they don't get in trouble. Does that answer your question, James?
Yes, it does. I like exactly how you said that. You know, that really kind of cleared things up for me. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. And thanks for letting us temporarily see your face. We know you drive and don't get in an accident. Okay, who's next? Question for Jeremy as it relates to what we discussed earlier. One of the things that really stood out to me is asking questions before making accusations. Jeremy, that's a huge aspect that I'm trying to learn when it comes to my own parenting, when it comes to my own marriage, and when it comes to my shepherding and leading of a team. How do you train yourself to do that when you're in such a pattern of behavior of judging and making an accusation? How have you practically trained yourself to do that?
That's a great question. I think the older my kids have gotten, the more that's been a very, very good help to me. My family makeup has really caused me to see people makeup. I've got 5 kids and they're so different. My wife and I are so different. And I'm watching as my kids are growing up and I'm watching them interact with each other, and I see the value that each one of them brings to our home, and how each one of them, their personality and the way they think, the perspective it brings to our family. So that has really helped me when it comes to a team. And this is where I just honestly say to you guys, I've not always been this way. Before, conformity was the best way. Like, just do what I tell you to do and everything is going to be okay. But I have really, I hope I'm answering your question here, Josh, but my own personal family has caused me to really see the value of different perspectives. My son is like ultra organized. My wife says he's just like me. He thinks like me. He acts like me. My youngest daughter is like the opposite. Like, she is like, just, I don't know where she came from. But she brings such joy and excitement to our family. We find ourselves laughing a lot and listening to her. And then as you're just listening to their perspective on life and their perspective on church and their perspective on ministry, I would say maturity has caused me to hear that and say, well, if that's what it is within my own home, within my own marriage, they're just people like everybody else. And I need to give the same people the same love and care that I give my own children, and listening and understanding. And so I think just kind of what I said to Chris when something doesn't sit well, but it has nothing to do with the Bible, it just simply doesn't sit well because it's not the way I think or see, let it play out, let it happen. Like, force a habit within your life to let something unfold without you having to have a say, and let that happen. And if it was a mistake, then you can always go back and teach it and reteach it and help somebody understand. But if it wasn't a mistake, then humbly look at it and learn from it.
Yeah.
And say, man, I grew. I'm a better leader because you helped me see something I never would have seen. And really what it was is humility helped you see something you never would have seen.
No, that helps me tremendously, especially for some, I value, like you do, the kids. And as I see the children, and then relating it to the fact that I would never want somebody to approach Scarlett or Savannah or Jonathan in that way, and how extremely different they are, to see that mirrored in my own team. I saw David took himself off mute, which means he might have a question. David?
Yeah, I love what you said about if somebody's doing something and it's not, if they have to do it the way you would do it, they're not pouring themselves into it. They're not doing it with their excellence. They're maybe in your way. And so if they did it their way, then their creativity would be poured into it, or like it would become an excellent thing to them. Do you feel that that you should wait until they do it differently, and then observe that I see that their difference is better, or do you feel like you should go to them and encourage them? Do you feel like you would do this differently and enjoy it more? Do you feel like encouraging them to do it differently, or just seeing if they do it differently? Which direction would you take?
Yeah. So if it's something that I feel like they're going to self-destruct, or there's going to be some consequences that they can't overcome, then I think you go to that person before they make the mistakes, before they self-destruct, or before they do some things that they're going to lose leadership and hurt themselves by what people see. If it's not that, then I would say let things play out. The longer I've been in ministry and the older I'm getting, the more I'm seeing the value of truly coaching. And in coaching, you have to let people make mistakes. You can sit someone down and say all day long, well, learn from me. I've made these mistakes and just learn from me. But the reality is people learn better from their mistakes than they do from your mistakes. And let them make mistakes. And a good coach and a good pastor, a good leader, walks right next to them as they're making mistakes and is able to analyze, okay, this is detrimental. I'm not going to let them make that mistake. Or this is not detrimental. This is a good learning lesson. I remember this. I'm walking right next to them. And as they're making the mistake, I'm here to help them realize it, overcome it, and here to help them move forward in their decision-making process. Now what you're doing is you're letting them make the decision, and you're letting them come to the conclusion. And again, I know I keep saying this, but at the same time, humility will let you learn something from them, to where at some point you might say, that really wasn't a mistake. That was just something I never learned, I never saw. And humility will let you see that as well. And so that's how I would approach, David, that's how I would approach that. If you know it's wrong, if you know they're going to fall, if you know it's going to hurt their leadership, step in. If it's a good learning lesson, walk with them as they fall and pick them up, dust them off, give them some advice, and let them keep riding.
Can I piggyback on that too?
Yeah.
So being on the receiving end of this, I'll tell you what it does for the leaders that you're developing as well. So I was here for about 8-9 weeks, and I told Pastor we need to go to eat at Cracker Barrel. And I said a statement, I don't even know if you remember this, but I said, I want to make sure I'm doing what you want me to be doing. And I want to make sure I make the decisions that you would make. And his response was exactly what he just said to you guys. Well, I don't want you to make the decision I would make. I want you to make the decision that the Spirit tells you to make. and then stick to that decision and deal with the consequences, whether good or bad. So that was April of this year. And I'll just tell you from personal experience, the amount that I've grown emotionally and mentally as a leader, knowing that I'm just going to do what I think is right until otherwise told, it's huge. It's just been huge for me. And I've developed a lot as a leader, just saying, okay, make good decisions and be confident in your decisions, which means you have to think a lot more about the decisions that you're making. Not what will the pastor want me to do? It's what does the Lord want me to do? And then make the decisions God wants me to make as a leader. So you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping the people that are under you as well to be better leaders.
That is so good. AJ raised his hand. He's having a very good year with Michigan being, and he's celebrating because this is a rare thing for Michigan fans, and this comes from a
That
bitter
rare.
Alabama
Not
fan.
that rare. Come on now. I did want to ask, is there anything that you do intentionally, Jeremy, that you talked about how getting to know your staff and talking to them, is there anything that, I mean, just idea wise, as far as intentionally getting to know your staff better, other than just, hey, come here, talk to me, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so remember I said this, I don't like to get close to people. My in-laws would come to visit us for holidays, and every time they were leaving, I would be in a different room. And my in-laws were like, finally they said to my wife, does he not like us here? We'll look at a hotel. And she's like, no, he loves you here. I don't like to say goodbye. So I don't know how to do that, AJ. That's the value of a team. So what I do is I have our executive pastor that does know how to do that. So what he does is he forces me to be in environments that we do those things. And I asked him to do that. So he plans to go to Topgolf with the guys. He plans, whatever it may be. Again, here's a guy that thinks totally different than me, but he's a huge asset to our team. And I ask him to do that for me because I recognize I'm not good at that. And it's not that I don't want to get close. I don't know how to get close. But I know I've got a guy on our team that is so different, that knows how to get close. So, hey, do me a favor. Put me in a place where I can get close to our guys. And so he takes care of that. And he sees that as a priority. We're different. We bring something different to our team, and our team is better because of that. Now, I want to do that. Now, if I didn't want to do that, we'd have a big problem. I want to do it. I don't know how to do it. And so I want somebody on my team that will help me get to do that. But I can't go back to my childhood and change everything. That's impossible. And I want to, even though I know it in my mind, in my heart, I don't know what to do to change it, other than allow people to be different than me, to walk alongside of me and minister alongside of me.
Follow-up comment, go blue.
Joe?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you just said is so vitally important. And to circle back from The Chosen, there was something in the element of those shows that caused me to go back to the Gospels and to realize how much Jesus taught his disciples going from place to place. So literally while walking. So a lot of his teaching took place not just in an organized format, but also in an organic format. And so we have times where we meet with staff organized, but we found the most times for us is organic. And so like for one of my assistant pastor, many of you met him in Texas, Zach thinks very differently than I do. So we spend a lot of time together. And one of the things that we do is we go play golf. Actually, we get together with Akeem once a month, Akeem Smith in Oakland, and we just talk. And it's pretty much a little bit about golf and mostly about just talking and getting through things. And so, but where else can you spend 3 to 4 hours doing something where you talk 3 to 4 hours? Like we'll get more talking done in a round of golf than we will in several weeks of an organized staff meeting, and talk about things where are so much vitally important, vision, feelings, all of these things. So I put that, and part of that was like Jesus spent a lot of time organically teaching people, not just in sermons and not just at dinner tables, but he did it organically. And so adding that element, I think, like you said, is very important.
It's good.
All right, we only have a few more minutes. If anybody wants to jump in and give that last question. Thanks, Joe. Anybody else? Last question? All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for the content today. That was incredibly helpful. And thank you for being constantly available to even follow up with these discussions. Thanks, Richard, for your comment in the back as well. And it's good to see you. My Las Vegas pal moved out to Ohio. God bless each and every one of you guys. Looking forward, as we said, to the summit, which is only a few weeks away. A special hello from Brother Schuler, who is not with us today. He is traveling and misses being here, but of course was thankful for each and every one of you. Thanks again for the support, and thank you for this conversation. God bless you, and we will see you next week.